What's up, y'all? So we had two circuses tonight. We had this fascist asshole, Tucker Carlson, traveling all the way to Moscow, Russia, to interview Vladimir Putin. And then we had our very own doddering, senile idiot of a president that liberals, for whatever reason, think should rule over us for 4 more years. This guy's 81 years old. He needs to be somewhere playing with puppies and grandchildren, not uh, stumbling through crisis after crisis after crisis. That's elder abuse. But if there's one thing the Democrats are good at, if it's one thing that political actors, mainstream political actors in this country are good at, it is abuse. Abuse of working people, abuse of elders, abuse of black people, abuse of everybody. So, how are we going to end this abuse? Of course, through a revolution. But in the meantime, let's have some laughs. So, let's see what TC has to say.
The following is an interview with the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, shot February 6, 2024 at about 7 p.m. in the building behind us, which is, of course, the Kremlin. The interview, as you...
The Kremlin isn't a building. The Kremlin is a complex of buildings. It's like a fortress. Like pretty much every major Russian city has a Kremlin. A Kremlin is basically a citadel. It's like the Acropolis in Greece. Um, but yeah, I guess the idiot can be forgiven for not knowing that.
You will see if you watch it, is primarily about the war in progress, the war in Ukraine, how it started, what's happening, and most pressingly, how it might end. One note before you watch. At the beginning of the interview, we asked the most obvious question, which is, why did you do this? Did you feel a threat, an imminent physical threat? And that's your justification. And the answer we got shocked us. Putin went on for a very long time, probably half an hour, about the history of Russia going back to the 8th century. And honestly, we thought this was a filibustering technique and found it.
Does this guy, like, does Putin not know who Tucker Carlson's audience is? These people don't care about the history of Russia. These people don't care about the history of anything. These people care about jingo bullshit and, yeah, suppressing and oppressing people. Like, that's why all of these multipolarity weirdos love Xi Jinping and why they love Putin, because they like Putin's regressive ass pseudo-fascist treatment of queer people in his own country, and his authoritarian crackdowns on anything that even remotely resembles the Sith. That's why they like Putin. They don't want to hear about fucking Boris Godunov or any of this. Like, they don't give a fuck.
Annoying and interrupted him several times, and he responded he was annoyed by the interruption. But we concluded in the end, for what it's worth, that it was not a filibustering technique. There was no time limit on the interview. We ended it after more than 2 hours. Instead,
Tucker looks like he's in front of a green screen. Yeah, all this snow that's just fucking asbestos that's raining down on his head.
What you're
asbestos will help the degenerate American immune system.
about to see seemed to us sincere, whether you agree with it or not. Vladimir Putin believes that Russia has a historic claim to parts of Western Ukraine. So our opinion would be to view it in that light, as a sincere expression of what he thinks. And with that, here it is. Mr. President, thank you. On February 22nd, 2022, you addressed your country in a nationwide address when the conflict in Ukraine started. And you said that you were acting because you had come to the conclusion that the United States, through NATO, might initiate a, quote, surprise attack on our country. And to American ears, that sounds paranoid. Tell us why you believe the United States might strike Russia out of the blue. How did you conclude that?
It's not that America, the United States, was going to launch a surprise strike on Russia. I didn't say that. Are we having a talk show or a serious conversation?
Putin is already mogging him in the first, like, fucking 10 seconds of the interview. I mean, he like, if it's one thing that Putin is, okay, this guy's a former KGB agent, right? Like, he was stationed in East Germany. Okay, like this guy is very good at sizing people up. So he knows that Tucker is an easily bullied little punk, and he probably also knows that Tucker is here to fucking fanboy. Like, look at him fucking soying out and being in the same room as Vladimir Putin. Like, he really thinks he's doing something big. Like, this is how Putin views all of these multipolarity idiots, all of these fucking Haas cells and MAGA chuds. Like, he views them as useful idiots.
Here's the quote. Thank you. It's a formidable series.
Так вот, да, это серьезный разговор. Но поскольку у вас базовое
Because your
образование...
basic
I can already predict how this is going to go. Vlad is going to be punking him throughout the whole fucking interview.
education is in history, as far as I understand.
Yes.
Тогда я позволю себе...
So, if you don't mind, I will take only 30 seconds or 1 minute to give you a short reference to history for giving you a little historical background.
Please.
Вот смотрите, с чего
Let's
началась
look
наша
where our
отношения?
relationship with Ukraine started from.
Откуда она взялась?
Where did Ukraine come from?
Российское государство стало
The
собираться
Russian state started gathering itself as a centralized statehood,
годом создания российского государства.
and it is considered to be the year of the establishment of the Russian state in 862,
Новгород на северо-западе страны
when the townspeople of Novgorod invited a Varangian prince,
Varangian means Viking. Yeah, Russia was founded in major part by Norse adventurers, and which we would call Vikings. It's really cool history.
Rurik from Scandinavia to reign.
варягов. 862 год. В 1800
In 1862, Russia celebrated the 1000th anniversary of its statehood.
своей государственности.
Yeah, like when we talk about Russia and China, like we're talking about like ancient states, like thousands of fucking years old. America isn't even 300 years old. Like the United States is a distinct polity. It's a baby compared to states like the UK, compared to France, compared to the Scandinavian countries, compared to Russia and China. Like that's why like a lot of average Russian and Chinese citizens, like they treat us like that. Like we act like fucking spoiled brats. We act like fucking spoiled babies. Because I mean that's essentially what we are. We're a very, very dangerous baby. We're a very, very rich baby. But in terms of the cycle of human history, we're still like shitting our pampers.
And in Novgorod, there is a memorial dedicated to the 1000th anniversary of the country.
882 году.
In 882, Rurik's successor, Prince Oleg, who was actually playing the role of regent at Rurik's younger son,
По сути, функция регента
because Rurik had died by that time, came to Kiev.
к этому времени пришел в Киев, отстранил от власти двух братьев,
He ousted two brothers who apparently had
членами дружины Рюрика,
once been members of Rurik's squad.
имея два центра в Киеве и в Новгороде.
So Russia began to develop with two centers of power, Kiev and Novgorod.
Следующая очень значимая дата в истории
The
России.
next very significant date in the history of Russia was 988.
Владимир
This guy's basically doing the Zionist thing. Like he's going all the way back to ancient fucking history to justify his country's invasion of Ukraine and make these old ass fucking revanchist claims. Like this is what every wannabe conqueror does. And it's funny, like people on Twitter are calling me a fucking Putin bot or something like that. Like I have never supported the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Ukraine is a state that is entitled to its own territorial sovereignty, and the average working people of Ukraine obviously do not deserve to have hostile foreign troops committing all sorts of atrocities in their country. Does this mean that I'm a fucking NATO boy? No. I think NATO is a bunch of fucking Yankee imperialist imbeciles and useful idiots. Honestly, I think both sides are fucking wrong. I think both sides have fucking have people who really have no business discussing politics. See, what Westerners do when we discuss global politics is like we tend to see it as like a fucking football game. Like I'm on team X, I'm on team red, white, and blue, and we're just going to be absolute fucking assholes to each other on the internet. Like that's how Westerners do politics. Shit, that's how most average people do politics. They don't do any deep analysis. They don't do any deep research. They don't do anything. They just, oh yeah, I got to support my boys, right or wrong. It's a very, very dangerous and fucked up way to look at the world. That's how war crimes happen. That's how genocides happen.
This was the baptism of Russia, when Prince Vladimir, the great-grandson of Rurik, baptized Russia and adopted Orthodoxy, or Eastern Christianity. From this time, the centralized Russian state began to strengthen. Why? Because of the single territory, integrated economic ties, one and the same language, and, after the baptism of Russia, the same faith and rule of the prince. The centralized Russian state began to take shape. Back in the Middle Ages,
I love the look on Carlson's face, like, bro, what the fuck are you talking about? Like he's like a confused frat boy that you're trying to explain black history to. I know this because I spent a substantial part of my my time in undergrad trying to explain black history to confused undergrads, much like Tucker Carlson. Like, this shit is going in one ear and out the other. Like, Tucker doesn't give a shit about Russian history.
Prince Yaroslav the Wise introduced the order of succession to a throne. But after he passed away, it became complicated for various reasons. The throne was passed not directly from father to eldest son, but from the prince who had passed away to his brother, then to his sons in different lines. All this led to the
Tucker Carlson isn't a liberal. Tucker Carlson is a fascist.
fragmentation and the end of Rus as a single
Of course, I know that the differentiation between liberals and fascists narrows with each passing day.
state. There was nothing special about it. The same was happening then in Europe.
Putin is oversimplifying so much here, he completely skipped over the part where the entire region was controlled by the Golden Horde. I imagine that would be embarrassing for him.
No.
As a Russian chauvinist and noted racist.
Раздробленное русское государство стало легкой добычей.
But the fragmented Russian state became an easy prey to the empire created earlier by Genghis Khan.
No, so he actually does mention it.
His successors, namely Batu Khan, came to Rus, plundered and ruined nearly all the cities. The southern part, including Kiev, by the way, and
The Mongols knew the essence of cracker control.
some other cities simply lost independence, while northern cities preserved some of their sovereignty. They had to pay tribute to the horde, but they managed to preserve some part of their sovereignty. And then a unified Russian state began to take shape with its center in Moscow.
Didn't this guy say that he was only going to spend like 30 seconds to a minute talking about this?
The southern part of Russian lands, including Kiev, began to gradually gravitate towards another magnet, the center that was emerging in Europe. This was the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. It was even called the Lithuanian-Russian Duchy, because Russians were a significant part of this population. They spoke the old Russian language and were Orthodox. But then there was a unification, the union of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and the Kingdom of Poland. A few years later, another union was signed, but this time already in the religious sphere.
I can't believe I'm getting an in-depth lesson on Eastern European history from an autocratic despot.
Some of the Orthodox priests became...
I mean, the guy is obviously presenting a very skewed and Russo-centric version of history, but like, it's obvious that he's not dumb. He knows his stuff, unless somebody is feeding him these tidbits through that earpiece.
Subordinate to the Pope. Thus, these lands became part of the Polish-Lithuanian state.
Yeah, it's basically the Russians and Ukrainians being extremely racist towards each other. Like the Ukrainians call the Russians orcs. And like I actually got into it with some NATO dudes. Like I asked them, like, why do you guys call the Russians orcs? Because they act like orcs. I'm like, that's particularly barbaric and racist. That's not a nice thing to call people. On the other hand, what Russia is doing in Ukraine is not particularly nice, but eh.
Этой части населения. Язык внедряли туда свой.
During decades, the Poles were engaged in Polonization of this part of the population.
Polonization.
They introduced their language.
Yeah, not only were you under the fucking boots of the Mongols, now you get turned into a fucking Polak.
There, tried to entrench the idea
Kurva.
that this population was not exactly Russians, that because they lived on the fringe, they were Ukrainians.
Занимается
Originally, the word Ukrainian meant that a person was living on the outskirts of the state, along the fringes, or was engaged in a border patrol service. It didn't mean any particular ethnic group.
поляки всячески
So the Poles were trying to,
относились
in every possible way, to colonize this part of the Russian lands, and actually treated it rather harshly, not to say cruelly. All that led to the fact that this part of the Russian lands began to struggle for their rights.
писали письма.
They wrote letters to Warsaw demanding that their rights be observed and people be commissioned here, including to Kiev.
I beg your pardon, can you tell us what period? I'm losing track of where in history we...
I knew this was going to happen. Like, he just has that absent-minded blank stare. Like, all of this shit is going in one ear and out the other. He's like, bro, just get to the war. Get to the war. That's what I'm here for. I don't want a fucking history lesson. It's fucking undergrad all over again. You remind me of that you remind me of fucking Professor Varshalovsky who gave me a D-. I can't do this, bro. I'm sorry.
We are
Это было
the Polish
это
oppression
было
of
в 13
Ukraine.
веке. Это было
It was in the
было в
13th century.
14 веке. Ну вот, в 13 веке. Это было в 13.
Honestly, yeah. I think that Tucker was right. I think this was a filibustering technique. He's trying to tire Tucker out with this fucking word salad, this stream of consciousness, like boring rant, so that he can't ask fucking hard questions. Honestly, that's what I would do.
Значит, и
Now I will tell you what happened later
дальше и назову даты, чтобы не было путаницы.
and give the dates so that there is no confusion.
В 1600,
And in 1654, even a bit earlier,
чуть раньше даже, люди, которые контролировали
the
власть,
people who were in control of the authority over that part of the Russian lands
чтобы присылали к ним
addressed Warsaw, I repeat, demanding that they send them to rulers of Russian origin and Orthodox faith. When Warsaw did not answer them, and in fact rejected their demands, they turned to Moscow, so that Moscow took them away.
No, we are approaching the 10-minute mark. This was a 2-hour and 7-minute long interview. Although it seems to be less an interview and more Russian and more Putin giving Tucker a long version Cliff Notes of Russian and Ukrainian history.
чтобы вы не думали, что я что-то придумал.
So that you don't
And those chairs don't look comfortable at all. They're torturing Tuck.
think that I'm inventing things. I'll give you these documents.
Oh my God. He's going to give Tucker homework?
Well, it doesn't sound like you're inventing it. I'm not sure why it's relevant to what happened 2 years ago.
No. You accept homework. You accept homework. You come chubby Amerikansky with your country club tie. You do Russian homework. A Russian child, we do homework, 5 years old, and then play chess for entertainment. You will accept homework.
Но все-таки
But still,
документы из архива.
these are documents from the archives, copies.
Здесь письма Богдана
Here are the letters from Bogdan Khmelnytsky,
контролировал власть в этой
the man who then controlled the power in this part of the Russian lands
в Варшаву.
that is now called Ukraine.
А после того,
He wrote to Warsaw demanding that their rights be upheld,
с просьбой взять их,
and after being refused, he began to write letters to Moscow, asking to take them under the strong hand of the Moscow Tsar. There are copies of these documents. I will leave them for your good memory. There is a translation into Russian. You can translate it into English later.
потому что
Russia
Oh my God, the documents aren't even translated. He handed this guy documents in one of the most difficult languages known to man. Putin is trolling the shit out of this dude.
Would not agree to admit them straight away, assuming that the war with Poland would start. Nevertheless, in 1654, the Pan-Russian Assembly of top clergy and landowners, headed by the Tsar, which was the representative body
I'm just flabbergasted. This was supposed to be an interview. Like, no. Interview later. Give Russian history lesson. Very long Russian history lesson. Here document, not translate into English. You do yourself. Amerikansky want everything done for them. You will accept document, you translate. Help you learn Russian better.
of the power of the old Russian state, decided to include a part of the old Russian lands into Moscow Kingdom. As expected, the war with Poland
Bro, can we talk about multipolarity now?
began. It lasted 13 years, and then in 1654, a truce was concluded. And 32 years later, I think,
Putin is torturing this dude. Like, this is some KGB shit. For real. Putin is torturing the fuck out of this dude. I mean, if there's anybody on the face of this planet who deserves torture, it's Tucker, but I'm actually starting to feel a little bad for the guy. Like, he is way out of his depth.
a peace treaty with Poland, which they called Eternal Peace, was signed. And these lands, the whole left bank of Dnieper, including Kiev, went to Russia. And the whole right bank of Dnieper remained in Poland.
It would be funny as fuck. Like, if there's a guy, like, just rambling this shit word for word into Putin's ear, and Putin is repeating it. How to torture stupid Amerikansky journalist. I will help you, Comrade President.
Under the rule of Catherine the Great, Russia reclaimed all of its historical lands, including in the south and west. This all lasted until the revolution. Before World War I, Austrian General Staff relied on the ideas
Even Putin looks bored.
of Ukrainianization and started actively promoting the ideas of Ukraine and the Ukrainianization.
Look at that heavy breathing. Look at that heavy breathing.
Their motive was obvious. Just before World War I, they wanted to weaken the potential enemy and
Yeah, Putin isn't saying all this shit off the top of his head. He has somebody feeding him something, or he memorized the script before he came in there.
secure themselves favorable conditions in the border area. So the idea which had emerged in Poland that people residing in that territory were allegedly not really Russians, but rather belonged to a special ethnic group, Ukrainians, started being propagated by the Austrian General Staff.
So basically what Putin is doing, he's basically trying to revise away the ethnic identity of Ukrainians as a people by saying that it's the fault of the Austrians, or it's the fault of the Poles, or it's the fault of the Lithuanians. So basically, yeah, let's just reunite these parts of these parts of Ukraine with Russia, because that's what they always have been. Like, this is the oldest revanchist technique in the book. Never mind what the people themselves want. Like, a people called Ukrainians objectively exists. These people are distinct from Russians. They do not want to be part of Russia. There is a sovereign country called Ukraine, and it is not just nor fair nor legal for a sovereign country to be invaded by another sovereign country. So what Putin is trying to do is basically just trying to filibuster and pull up all of these historical examples to justify his country's barbarous acts in Ukraine. I know some people might call me a NAFOid or a NATO backer, but it's just fucking common sense. It's just common sense. That war there is totally unjustified. I mean, were there valid security concerns? I mean, yeah, nobody wants a hostile military alliance hanging out south of their border, but it's still an excuse. That's what that is. Like, even before the whole NATO shtick, you had like the little green men that were roaming around in these disputed territories of Ukraine, and then you had the annexation of Crimea. So, yeah, Putin is full of shit.
As far back as the 19th century, theorists calling for Ukrainian independence appeared. All those, however, claimed that Ukraine should have a very good relationship with Russia. They insisted on that. After the 1917 revolution,
Oh, here we go. This is going to be good.
the Bolsheviks sought to restore the statehood and the civil war began, including the hostilities with Poland. In 1921, peace with Poland was proclaimed, and under that treaty, the right bank of Dnieper River once again was given back to Poland. In 1939, after Poland cooperated with Hitler, it did collaborate with Hitler, you know? Hitler offered Poland peace and a treaty of friendship. An alliance demanding in return that Poland...
I mean, I would call it a mistake. I mean, it was inevitable. That's what happens when you embrace revisionism. When you embrace revisionism and you set your country back on the capitalist road, you are basically ensuring your own collapse. Plus, there was a variety of reactionary nationalist sentiments and groups that came to the forefront and operated in the 70s and 80s, and then Russia stupidly decided to invade Afghanistan and basically set themselves up for a Vietnam War part 2, and then a lot of their boys that were coming back from Afghanistan were addicted to heroin, and, you know, it's just a nasty time. I mean, it was inevitable. Was it a geopolitical disaster of the first magnitude? Definitely. But, like, was it going to happen regardless? Yeah.
give back to Germany the so-called Danzig corridor, which connected the bulk of Germany with East Prussia and Königsberg. After World War I, this territory was transferred to Poland, and instead of Danzig, a city of Dansk emerged. Hitler asked them to give it amicably, but they refused.
Of course.
Anybody have any video wrecks on the fall of the USSR? I think Hakim had a really good one.
Still, they collaborated with Hitler and engaged together in the
Look at how he's grasping those glasses.
partitioning of Czechoslovakia.
But may I ask you, you're making the case that Ukraine, certainly parts of Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine, is in effect Russia has been for hundreds of years. Why wouldn't you just take it when you became president 24 years ago? You have nuclear weapons, they don't. If it's actually your land, why did you wait so long?
I'll tell you. I'm coming to that. This briefing is coming to an end. It might be boring, but it explains
boring.
many things.
You just don't know how it's relevant.
Good. Good. I'm so gratified that you appreciate that. Thank you. So, before World War II, Poland collaborated with Hitler, and although it did not yield to Hitler's demands,
He just blew Tucker off and went right back onto the same rant that he was doing.
it still participated in the partitioning of Czechoslovakia together with Hitler, as the Poles had not given the Danzig corridor to Germany and went too far, pushing Hitler to start World War II by attacking them. Why was it Poland against whom the war started on 1st September 1939? Poland turned out to be uncompromising, and Hitler had nothing to do but start implementing his plans with Poland. By the way, the USSR, I have read some archive documents, behaved very honestly. It asked Poland's permission to transit its troops through the Polish territory to help Czechoslovakia. But the then Polish foreign minister said that if the Soviet planes flew over Poland, they would be downed over the territory of Poland. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that the war began, and Poland fell prey to the policies it had pursued against Czechoslovakia, as under the well-known Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Part of the territory, including Western Ukraine, was to be given to Russia. Thus, Russia, which was then named the USSR, regained its historical lands.
Russia was part of the USSR. Americans make the mistake too. Like they see the USSR as being the same thing as Russia. Russians were part of the USSR, but they weren't the sole constituent republic of the USSR. The RSFSR was a thing, the Russian Socialist Federated Soviet Republic. But you also had Armenians, Uzbeks, Ukrainians, the 3 Baltic states. Like, come on, Putin. You grew up in the fucking USSR. You should know all of this.
After the victory in the Great Patriotic War, as we call World War II, all those territories were ultimately enshrined as belonging to Russia, to the USSR. As for Poland, it received, apparently in compensation, the lands which had originally been German. The eastern parts of Germany, these are now western lands of Poland. Of course, Poland regained access to the Baltic Sea and Danzig, which was once again given its Polish name. So this was how this situation developed.
Now he looks pissed.
In 1922, when the
Look, commie.
USSR was being
Look, commie. Get to the point.
established, the Bolsheviks started building the USSR and established the Soviet Ukraine, which had never existed before.
Right.
Yuliana says, modern Ukraine did a lot of revisionist history about that. They basically hero worship the Nazi collaborators instead of all the Ukrainians that fought in the Red Army. That is very true. They are big fans of Stefan Bandera and others of his ilk, who spent a substantial portion of their time carrying out anti-Semitic pogroms.
Stalin insisted that those republics be included in the USSR as autonomous entities. For some inexplicable
Does this motherfucker have the entire compass, all of the federated republics of the USSR? I'm impressed, Canethius. Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Estonia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan. God.
reason,
Everybody join USSR.
Lenin, the founder of the Soviet state, insisted that they be entitled to withdraw from the USSR.
Yeah, the right of self-determination.
And
Which Putin here apparently doesn't believe in because he is a Russian chauvinist and territorial revanchist.
again, for some unknown reasons, he transferred to that newly established Soviet Republic of Ukraine some of the lands together with people living there, even though those lands
So he's trying to blame it all on Lenin.
had never been called Ukraine, and yet they were made part of that Soviet Republic of Ukraine. Those lands included the Black Sea region, which was received under Catherine the Great, and which had no historical connection with Ukraine whatsoever. Even if we go as far back as 1654, when these lands returned to Russian Empire, that territory was the size of 3 to 4 regions of modern Ukraine, with no Black Sea region. That was completely out of the question.
In 1654.
Exactly.
You obviously have encyclopedic knowledge of this region, but why didn't you make this case for the first 22 years as president that Ukraine wasn't a real country?
Да. Итак, значит, Советская Украина получила
The Soviet Union was given a great deal of territory that had never belonged to it, including the Black Sea region.
когда Россия их получила в результате
At some point, when Russia received them as an outcome of the Russo-Turkish Wars,
Белоруссии.
they were called New Russia or Novorossiya.
Ленин, основатель
But that does not matter. What matters is that Lenin, the founder of the Soviet state,
И вот это все
established Ukraine that way.
в составе СССР
For decades, the Ukrainian Soviet Republic developed as part of the USSR,
по непонятным причинам занимались
and for unknown reasons again, the Bolsheviks were engaged in Ukrainianization. It was not merely because the Soviet leadership was composed to a great extent of those originating from Ukraine.
Украины и других
Rather,
Yeah, he's not like he is omitting very important details, and he shows a marked lack of understanding of the fundamental principles of Marxism-Leninism, one of which is the right of self-determination of nations. Like, he's basically denying the existence of a Ukrainian nation at all. He's basically laying the very existence of Ukraine at the feet of various empires throughout history, and also at the feet of Lenin and the USSR, which is just wrong. Like, he wants us to believe that there is no such thing as Ukraine. Ukrainians do not exist. They are basically long lost brothers of Great Rus.
it was explained
I'm half expecting him to go, Lenin was a Polish Ukrainian Westerner. Yeah, smuggled into the what was soon to become the Soviet Union, smuggled into Finland Station in a fucking sealed train by Kaiser Wilhelm.
by the general policy of indigenization pursued by the Soviet Union. Same things were done in other
I don't think he was a Marxist-Leninist when he was still in the KGB, no. Putin is a pragmatic imperialist.
Soviet republics. This involved promoting national languages and national cultures, which is not a bad in principle. That is how the Soviet Ukraine was created. After the World War II, Ukraine received, in addition to the lands that had belonged to Poland before the war, part of the lands that had previously belonged to Hungary and Romania. So Romania and Hungary had some of their lands taken away and given to the Soviet Ukraine, and they still remain part of Ukraine. So in this sense, we have every reason to affirm that Ukraine is an artificial state that was shaped at Stalin's will.
Do you believe Hungary
Oh, no. You know, Putin's granddad, I think, was Stalin's chef. Yeah.
has a right to take its land back from Ukraine, and that other
Yeah, he's blaming Lenin and Stalin, and now he's denied the very existence of Ukraine. He says that Ukraine is an artificial state. Kind of reminds me of what imbeciles that also really, really dig Putin was saying about Guyana last fall, when the issue of the Essequibo was raised, when Maduro held this bullshit referendum to basically like gin up public support because he's in his own political trouble at home for revanchist claims on the Essequibo region of Guyana. And it was a big Twitter bullshit war about that. People who didn't even know Guyana existed until it hit the news were suddenly claiming that Guyana is an artificial state. And you go to Flatbush and say that, you might end up with what West Indian comrades call a cutlass embedded in your skull. But yeah, Putin is a reactionary. There's no question about it.
nations have a right to go back to their 1654 borders?
Ну, я не знаю, как границы.
He's getting ready to lecture this dude like an errant schoolboy. Listen, Tucker, what did I not just explain to you? I spent 20 minutes explaining to you. Ukraine fake. Ukraine fake. What you not understand? What can you not get to tiny walnut-sized Amerikansky brain? Ukraine fake. Why you ask stupid question?
I'm not sure whether they should go back to the 1654 borders.
Все считают, что
But given Stalin's time, so-called Stalin's regime, which as many claim saw numerous violations of human rights and violations of the rights of other states,
Oh my God. I'm not the biggest Stalin fanboy, but like this is just blatant anti-communism.
в этом смысле, конечно, вполне можно.
Like that's how I know that these Haas cells and these Midwest Marx weirdos and all of these other multipolarity bros, that's how you know that they're not real communists. Like, how the fuck are you going to simultaneously uphold this fuck and then uphold Stalin? Like, Putin despises Stalin. Putin despises Lenin. Why should he respect Marxism and try to give nations that he doesn't support their sovereignty? He's out for power, not happy friendship with the West. That is true.
Ну, если не говорить о том, что они имеют на это право.
One may say that they could claim back those lands of theirs while having no right to do that. It is at least understandable.
Have you told Viktor Orban that he can have part of Ukraine?
Have you told the fascist that he can satisfy his own territorial revanchist claims?
Никогда не говорил.
Never. I have never told him, not a single time.
У нас с ним даже на этот счет не было никаких разговоров. Но мне достоверно.
We have not even had any conversation on that, but I actually know for sure that Hungarians who live there
Они, конечно, хотят вернуться на свою историю.
wanted to get back to their historical land.
Oh my God.
Moreover, I would like to share a very interesting story with you.
Где-то
Another 20-minute long tirade.
I digress, it's a personal one.
из
Somewhere in the early 80s, I went on a road trip in a car from then Leningrad across the Soviet Union through Kiev,
выехал
made a stop in Kiev, and then went to western Ukraine.
название
I went to the town of Beregovoye, and all the names of towns and villages there were in Russian and in a language I did not understand, in Hungarian, in Russian and in Hungarian,
возле
not in Ukrainian, in Russian and in Hungarian. I was driving through some kind of village, and there were men sitting next to the houses, and they were wearing black three-piece suits and black cylinder hats. I asked, are they some kind of entertainers? I was told, no, they were not entertainers, they're Hungarians.
I was told they're not entertainers, they're Hungarians. I have a Hungarian friend. He is very entertaining.
I said, what are they doing here? What do you mean? This is their land, they live here. This was during the Soviet time in the 1980s. They preserved the Hungarian language, Hungarian names, and all their national costumes. They are Hungarians and they feel themselves to be Hungarians. And of course, when now there is an infringement,
Well, that is, and there's a lot of that, though. I think many nations, they're upset about Transylvania as well, as you obviously know. But many nations feel
Transylvania.
frustrated by the redrawn borders of the wars of the 20th century and wars going back 1,000 years, the ones that you mentioned.
Was he referring to Transnistria? Pretty sure that Transylvania is solidly part of Romania.
But the fact is that you didn't make this case in public until 2 years ago, February. And in the case that you made, which I read today,
Сейчас скажу.
I went to a store, Vietnamese grocery store near me, and most of it was not in English. Is Minnesota secretly the sovereign lands of Vietnam? Yes. Yes. For the war crimes of American soldiers, we should cede Minnesota to Vietnam.
you explain at great length that you felt a physical threat from the West in NATO, including potentially a nuclear threat, and that's what got you to move. Is that a fair characterization of what you said?
Oh, that's bullshit. Like, I swear to God, if this guy says that he legit believed that NATO was going to use nuclear weapons on Russia, I mean, we're 23 minutes in and he's already exposed himself as being a fucking liar. Let's see what other lies he has for us.
Я понимаю, что поскольку мои длинные диалоги, они
I understand that my long speeches probably fall outside of the genre of the interview. That is why I asked you at the beginning, are we going to have a serious talk or a show?
так что не обижайтесь.
You said a serious talk,
Ну так вот.
so bear with me,
подошли
please.
к тому моменту, когда
We're coming to the point where the Soviet Ukraine was established.
1991 год.
Then, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed.
I honestly think that Tucker wants to fuck Putin. Honestly, look at those doe eyes.
Получила в подарок от
And
России
everything that Russia had generously bestowed on Ukraine was dragged away by the
в
latter.
целом, вот я подхожу сейчас к очень важному
I'm
моменту.
coming to a very important point of today's agenda.
Этот развал Советского Союза.
Thank you.
After all,
This guy's acting like he's at a fucking meeting. I'm coming to very important point of agenda, Amerikanski frat boy posing as journalist. Also, failed CIA agent.
the collapse of the Soviet Union was effectively initiated by the Russian
Я не
leadership.
знаю, чем тогда руководствовалось руководство России.
I wonder if he knows what revisionism is.
Но
I do not understand
подозреваю,
what the Russian
что
leadership was guided by at the time, but I
э,
suspect there were
несколько
several reasons to think everything would be fine.
Первое. Ну, во-первых, я думаю, что руководство России исходило из того, что
First,
фундаментальные
I think that then Russian leadership believed that the fundamentals of the relationship between Russia and Ukraine were, in fact, a common language. More than 90% of the population there spoke Russian.
у каждого третьего какие-то родственные связи.
Family ties. Every third person there had some kind of family or friendship ties. Common culture, common history. Finally, common faith, coexistence with a single state for centuries, and deeply interconnected economies.
Экономика очень сильно взаимосвязана.
All of these were so fundamental. All these elements together make our good relationships inevitable.
Я хочу, чтобы вы, как американские гражданины, чтобы
The second point is a very important one.
прежнее российское руководство
I want you, as an American citizen, and your viewers to hear about this as well.
больше никаких разделителей.
The former Russian leadership assumed that the Soviet Union had ceased to exist, and therefore there were no longer any ideological dividing lines.
Инициативно пошла даже на развал Советского Союза.
Russia even agreed
There really weren't. I mean, the USSR was just more blatantly authoritarian, but as a Maoist, it's a truth that between revisionism and open capitalism, there's really not all that much difference from the point of view of an average working person. That's why we say that revisionism is the ideology and practices of the bourgeoisie within the communist movement.
voluntarily and proactively to the collapse of the Soviet
Так
Union,
называемым
and believed that this would be understood by the so-called civilized West as an invitation for cooperation and
Вот чего
association.
ожидала Россия.
That is what Russia was expecting, both from the United States and the so-called collective West as a whole.
В том числе и в Германии. Эгон Барр.
There were smart people, including in Germany, Egon Bahr, a major politician of the Social Democratic Party, who insisted in his personal conversations with the Soviet leadership on the brink of the collapse of the Soviet Union that a new security system should be established in Europe.
Помочь объединиться Германии, но
Help should be given to unify Germany, but a new system should be also established to include the United States, Canada, Russia, and other Central European countries.
Yes.
But NATO needs not to expand. That's what he said. If NATO expands, everything would be just the same as during the Cold War, only closer to Russia's borders. That's all.
Больше того, он рассердился как-то.
He was a wise old man, but no one listened to him. In fact, he got angry once.
Рассердился на советское руководство.
If, he said, you don't listen to me, I'm never setting my foot in Moscow once again.
Honestly, I don't think never setting your foot in Moscow is a punishment. By Putin's logic, either the UK or the US would be justified in taking over the other because they share a common language, religion, and historical ties.
Но, тем не менее,
Everything happened just as he had said.
Well, of course, it did come true, and you've mentioned this many times. I think it's a fair point, and many in America thought that relations between Russia and the United States would be fine with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. That the opposite happened, but you've never explained why you think that happened, except to say that the West fears a strong.
Does Putin understand English? Or does he just have a really good translator working through that little earpiece of his?
Russia, but
I think he's one of those people that understands it but can't speak it.
we have a strong China the West does not seem very afraid of. What about Russia, do you think, convinced policymakers they had to take it down?
Запад боится сильного Китая больше, чем сильной России.
The West is afraid of strong China more than it fears a strong Russia, because Russia has 150 million people and China has 1.5 billion population, and its economy is growing by leaps and bounds, or 5% a year. It used to be even more. But that
Yeah, I've seen an analysis that says that like Russia is basically going to end up being a vassal state of China. Honestly, it's pretty compelling.
It's enough for China. As Bismarck once put it, potentials are the most important. China's potential is enormous. It is the biggest economy
I feel like if Putin could understand English, he would have refused to speak it on principle.
in the world today in terms of purchasing power parity and the size of the economy. It has already overtaken the United States.
Fun fact, Putin can speak English, but very poorly. And the few times he's spoken English publicly, he has an exceptionally high voice, like a little kid. So he's like Huey Newton. Like Huey Newton hated public speaking because he had like this really squeaky voice.
Quite a long time ago, and it is growing at a rapid clip. Let's not talk about who is afraid of whom. Let's not reason in such terms. And let's get into the fact that after 1991, when Russia expected that it would be welcomed into the brotherly family of civilized nations, nothing like this happened. You tricked us. I don't mean you personally when I say you. Of course, I'm talking about the United States. The promise was that NATO would not expand eastward, but it happened 5 times. There were 5 waves of expansion. We tolerated all that. We were trying to persuade them. We were saying, please don't. We are as bourgeois now as you are. We are market economy and there is no communist party power. Let's
Oh, wow, this is the truest thing he said all night.
negotiate. Moreover, I have also said this.
I think Rainer Shea, one of those morons, wrote that Russia's moving back towards socialism. But here you literally have the fucking autocrat. You have Putin saying that we're as bourgeois as you. There is no communist party power, and we are a market economy.
Publicly.
Multipolarity bros are going to be so disappointed. No, they're going to do the same thing that they always do. They're going to delude themselves, and they're going to try to delude other people, and then they're going to get mad and call people CIA agents when people don't believe their delusions.
Before, there was a moment when a certain rift started growing between us. Before that, Yeltsin came to the United States, remember?
Honestly, I don't think Jack Hinkle has like independent thoughts of his own. I think he relies on Haas to feed him whatever crap he wants to, whatever crap Haas wants. He's basically Haas's little twink face. That's what Hinkle is. Like, he doesn't have original thoughts. Like, read the guy's Twitter. He types like a fucking 3rd grader. No. These are not serious people. These are not serious political actors. These are not serious theoreticians. These are not serious political theorists. They're just idiots that like to hear themselves talk. Like, if you're a supposed communist and you bill yourself as the most canceled man on the internet, and your views are indistinguishable from your 78-year-old boomer grandfather who thinks that Alex Jones was right when he said that chemicals, fluoride in the water is turning the frogs gay, and he spends most of his time complaining about sexuality in video games that are not marketed to children. No, you're not a communist. You're an imbecile.
He spoke in Congress and said the good.
And we also need to keep in mind that Hinkle openly admitted that everything he does is a grift, yet stupid people continue to pay $3 to read more of his rants. But a fool and his money are quickly parted.
Good words. God bless America. Everything he said were signals. Let us in. Remember the developments in Yugoslavia before the Yeltsin was lavished with praise? As soon as the developments in Yugoslavia started, he raised his voice in support of Serbs, and we couldn't but raise our voices for Serbs in their defense. I understand that there were complex processes underway there, I do, but Russia could not help raising its voice in support of Serbs, because Serbs are also a special and close to us nation, with Orthodox culture and so on. It's a nation that has suffered so much for generations. Well, regardless, what is important
I'll be back.
Is that Yeltsin expressed his support. What did the United States do? In violation of international law and the UN Charter, it started bombing Belgrade. It was the United States that let the genie out of the bottle. Moreover, when Russia protested and expressed its resentment, what was said? The UN Charter and international law have become obsolete. Now everyone invokes international law, but at that time they started saying that everything was outdated. Everything had to be changed. Indeed, Some things need to be changed, as the balance of power has changed. It's true, but not in this manner. Yeltsin was immediately dragged through the mud, accused of alcoholism, of understanding nothing, of knowing nothing. He understood everything, I assure you. Well, I became president in 2000. I thought, okay, the Yugoslav issue is over, but we should try to restore relations. Let's reopen the door that Russia had tried to go through. And moreover, I said it publicly, I can reiterate. At a meeting here in the Kremlin with the outgoing president Bill Clinton, right here in the next room, I said to him, I asked him,
Yeah, I was muted, I'm sorry. But yeah, there is a pretty large anarchist movement in Russia, and there's also a Maoist party that that organizes protests and leaflets and conducts political education. But the political situation in Russia is radically different than the United States, because at least the United States has the facade of civil liberties. But if you've been keeping track of the Cop City protests and the state suppression of it, as you should, you know that what semblance of civil liberties we have are slowly and more rapidly being eroded. But in Russia, they don't even have the facade. Like, if you speak up against the government there, especially in wartime, like, they will beat the shit out of you and they will throw you in prison for a very long time. So organizing there is radically different. But the anarchists have been engaging in clandestine sabotage of the country's already crumbling rail network and a variety of other things, direct action wise. So there is resistance in Russia, and we should all support it.
Bill, do you think if Russia asked to join NATO, do you think it would happen? Suddenly he said, you know, it's interesting. I think so. But in the evening, when we met for dinner, he said, you know, I've talked to my team. No, it's not possible now. You can ask him. I think he will watch our interview. He'll confirm it. I wouldn't have said anything like that if it hadn't happened. Okay.
Were you
It's
sincere?
impossible now.
Would you have joined NATO?
Look, I asked the question, is it possible or not? And the answer I got was no. If I was insincere in my desire to find out what the leadership position was...
But if he had said yes, would you have?
My mega anti-communist uncle said that Putin and Bernie Sanders are both Stalinists. Oh man, the level of political discourse in this country is so low.
Join NATO.
If he had said yes, the process of rapprochement would have commenced, and eventually it might have happened, if we had seen some sincere wish on the other side of our partners.
Oh yeah, they believe, the multipolarity revisionists believe that the anarchists and other resistance groups that are actively organizing against this guy, Putin, yeah, they're basically saying that they're CIA or Ukrainian agents or ultras or other shit. The multipolarity bros call the NPA jungle trots and worse things because they refuse to accept life under first Rodrigo Duterte and then the Marcos clique.
But it didn't happen. Well, no means no. Okay, fine.
Why do you think that is? Just to get to motive. I know you're clearly bitter about it. I understand.
Bernie Sanders is a revisionist. Bernie Sanders is a center-left social democrat.
But why do you think the West rebuffed you then? Why the hostility? Why did the end of the Cold War not fix the relationship? What motivates this from your point of view?
Вы сказали, что
You said I was bitter about the answer. No, it's not bitterness. It's just a statement of fact. We're not bride and groom, bitterness, resentment. It's not about those kind of matters in such circumstances. We just realized we weren't welcome there, that's all. Okay, fine. But let's build relations in another manner.
Now he's playing the fucking victim. Oh, they didn't want us, so we had to do our own thing.
Let's look for common ground elsewhere. Why we received such a negative response, you should ask your leaders. I can only guess why. Too big a country with its own opinion and so on. And the United States, I've seen how issues are being resolved in NATO. I will give you another example now concerning Ukraine. The US leadership exerts pressure, and all NATO members obediently vote, even if they do not like.
The NPA is the New People's Army. It is the armed wing of the Communist Party of the Philippines. The NPA was formed in 1969, if I recall correctly, on Mao Zedong's birthday. And it has been engaged in protracted People's War for the past several decades. You should do some research and look them up.
Like something. Now, I'll tell you what happened in the
Revolutionary Blackout Network was covering this. They believed everything Putin was saying. I mean, I don't beef with other black content creators and people who do what I do, but yeah, that was wrong. They have some revisionist tendencies, but I know those guys, they're decent people. They're just wrong on many things.
disregard with Ukraine in 2000.
It's not even as much an interview. It's just Putin bullying the shit out of Tucker. And Tucker just sitting there taking it like a little cuck.
Although it's being discussed. I'm not going to open a secret to you, say anything new. Nevertheless, after that we tried to build relations in different ways. For example, the events in the Middle East, in Iraq. We were building relations with the United States in a very soft, prudent, cautious manner. I repeatedly raised the issue that the
Do soft, prudent, and cautious accurately describe anything pertaining to Russia?
United States should not support separatism or terrorism in the North Caucasus. But they continue to do it anyway. And political...
Hey, BRG, you should do an interview like this where you just describe the life of Mao Zedong and the entire Haitian Revolution. With who? Tucker Carlson? I'd have to, try very hard and probably fail to avoid strangling him. I don't want to talk to fucking Tucker Carlson. Why would I do that? Why do you all want to see me suffer?
Support, information support, financial support, even military support came from the United States and its satellites for terrorist groups in the Caucasus.
That ended up backfiring. Because a lot of people think that they were MK Ultra, but you have the Sarnaev brothers, Dzhokhar and Tamerlan, who ended up carrying out the Boston Marathon bombing. So, yeah. America has a really, really long-running habit of backing these shitty terrorist groups, and it coming back to bite us in the ass. We did the same thing with OBL's group in the 80s. Honestly, just leave these people the fuck alone. Pull all of our military assets out. Quit funding these people. Let this shit resolve itself. We do not have to be the world's policemen. We do not have to be the cops of the world. We will have far, far less grief if we learn to leave people the fuck alone.
I once raised this issue with my colleague, also the President of the United States. He says, "It's impossible. Do you have proof?" I said, "Yes." I was prepared for this conversation, and I gave him that proof. He looked at it, and you know what he said? I apologize, but that's what happened. I'll quote. He says, "Well, I'm gonna kick their ass." We waited and waited for some response.
Is he talking about Trump? Because I know he couldn't stand Obama. I think he's talking about Trump.
There was no reply. I said to the FSB director, "Write to the CIA, what is the result of the conversation with President?" He wrote once, twice, and then we got a reply. We have the answer in the archive. The CIA replied, "We have been working with the opposition in Russia. We believe that this is the right thing to do, and we will keep on doing it." Just ridiculous. Well, okay. We realized that it was out of the question.
Forces in opposition to you.
It might have been Bush. Bush said that he looked into Putin's eyes and he saw that he had a soul or some shit.
So you're saying the CIA is
Submonkey says he's talking about Trump.
trying to overthrow your government.
Ну, конечно, имелось в виду в данном
Of
случае.
course, they meant in that particular case the separatists, the terrorists who fought with us in the Caucasus.
Они их называли.
That's who they called the opposition.
Это вот второй момент.
This is the
Третий момент
second
очень
point.
важный.
The third moment is a very important one. Is the moment when the US missile defense system was created.
If Mao Zedong came back from the grave, he would die of all the air pollution in Beijing. Did you all know that he fucked his, like the Chinese fucked his embalming up? Li Zhishui, his doctor, who is by no means like an all-authoritative source, but it describes how since they had the whole Sino-Soviet split thing going on, and they didn't have access to the people who did Lenin and Stalin's bodies for display, the Chinese were basically on their own when Mao died, so they basically just pumped his body full of formaldehyde until his head swelled up like a soccer ball. His stomach bloated so much that it burst the suit that they were going to bury him, and his ears stuck out at right angles. Yeah, they fucked up Mao's embalming. So if Mao was able to rise up out of the glass box that he's currently resident in, he would probably just die again.
Начало.
The beginning.
И мы долго уговаривали.
We persuaded for a long time not to do it in the United States.
Меня пригласили в
Moreover,
отец Буша.
after was invited by Bush Jr.'s father, Bush Sr., to visit his place on the ocean,
Там состоялась очень серьезная беседа.
I had a very serious conversation with
I didn't know Putin had been to Kennebunkport.
President Bush and his team.
Чтобы
I proposed that the United States, Russia, and Europe jointly create a missile defense system that, we believe,
которая, как мы считаем,
if created unilaterally, threatens our security, despite the fact that the United States officially said that it was being created against missile threats from Iran. That was the justification for the deployment of
Hello, Comrade Lahila.
the missile defense system. I suggested working together, Russia, the United States, and Europe. They said it was very interesting. They asked me, "Are you serious?" I said, "Absolutely."
Wasn't there a guy who got arrested for rubbing his dick on Mao's coffin? No. You would not even be able, I don't even think you could get close to it, get that close enough to it to be able to do something like that in the first place. And then they would see what you're doing and they would probably shoot you, to be honest.
Let me ask, what year was this?
Ну, я не помню. Вот,
I don't remember.
в интернете, когда я был.
It is easy to find
Oh my God, Putin is senile too.
out on the internet when I was in the USA.
Honestly, I try to avoid comparisons of one leader to another leader. I don't think Trump would be able to be in power for 24 fucking years. Like Putin has KGB training. He has that type of operational training, and he knows how to stay in power. He's not loud. He's not bombastic. He's not arrogant like Trump is. He just sits there and he quietly does what he thinks is his business.
At the invitation of Bush Sr.
I think I have to go to bed. Putin's more effective than melatonin for treating insomnia. That is very true. He is a very, very boring person. It's like a gray man. That's what he is. He's a gray fucking guy.
It is even easier to learn from someone I'm going to tell you about.
Мне сказали, это очень интересно.
I was told it was very interesting. I said, just imagine if we could tackle such a global strategic security challenge together. The world will change. We'll probably have disputes, probably economic and even political ones, but we could drastically change the situation in the world. He says yes, and asks, "Are you serious?" I said, "Of course. We need to think about it," I'm told.
Вот в этот кабинет.
I said, "Go ahead, please." Then Secretary of Defense Gates, former director of CIA, and Secretary of State Rice came in here, in this cabinet, right here at this table. They sat on this table. Me, the foreign minister, the Russian defense minister on that side.
Министр обороны.
They said to me,
Они мне
"Yes, we have thought about it. We agree." I said, thank God, great,
Но
but with some exceptions.
So twice you've described US presidents making decisions and then being undercut by their agency heads. So it sounds like you're describing a system that's not run by the people who were elected in your telling.
именно так.
That's right,
В конечном
that's right.
итоге нас послали подальше. Я не буду
In the end, they just told
Oh, very right, Tuckers. You are not as stupid as you look. You can follow conversation and come to correct conclusion.
us to get lost.
корректно.
I'm not going to tell you the details because I think it's incorrect. After all, it was confidential
Наше предложение
conversation.
было отклонено.
But our proposal was declined. That's a
Тогда,
fact.
именно тогда я сказал,
It was right then when I said, look, but then we will be forced to take countermeasures.
будем создавать такие
We will
удары.
create such strike systems that will certainly overcome
Hello, Nate.
missile defense systems.
Still sunburned from your Mexican vacation, I see?
Был такой. Мы
The answer was,
вас, а вы
we are
делаете,
not
что
doing
хотите.
this against you and you do what you want,
Не против
assuming that it is not against us, not against the United States.
гиперзвуковые системы.
I said, okay. Very well.
Межконтинентальные.
That's the way it went. And we created hypersonic systems with intercontinental range, and we continue to develop them. We are now ahead of everyone, the United States and the other countries, in terms of the development of hypersonic strike systems, and we are improving them every day.
Сделали. Мы
But it wasn't
предлагали
us.
пойти другим.
We proposed to go the other way, and we were pushed
Теперь
back.
по поводу расширения НАТО на восток.
Now,
Ну,
about
обещали.
NATO's expansion to the
Какого
east.
НАТО на восток?
Well, we were promised no NATO to the east, not an inch to the east, as we were told. And then what?
Что сказали? Ну,
They said, well, it's not enshrined on paper, so
поэтому
we'll
будем
expand.
расширять. 5 расширений.
So there were 5 waves of expansion, the Baltic states, the whole of Eastern Europe, and so on.
И вот теперь прихожу к главному.
And now I come to the main thing. They have come to the Ukraine, ultimately. In 2008, at the summit in Bucharest, they declared that the doors for Ukraine and Georgia to join NATO were open. Now about how decisions are made there. Germany, France seem to be against it, as well as some other European countries. But then, as it turned out later, President Bush, and he's such a tough guy, a tough politician, as I was told later, he exerted pressure on us and we had to
Он
agree.
нас нажал.
It's ridiculous, it's like kindergarten.
Вот смешно.
Where are the guarantees? What kindergarten
Где
is
гарантия-то
this?
просто?
What kind of people are these? Who are they?
Кто они такие?
You see, they were pressed, they agreed.
А потом они говорят,
And then they say, Ukraine won't be in the NATO, you know? I say, I don't know. I know you agreed in 2008. Why won't you agree in the future?
я говорю, а почему завтра?
Well, they pressed us then. I say, why
Why do you think the U.S. is opposed to cooperation with the capitalist Russia? That was weaker at the time. I mean, if you just look at where Russia is situated, it's still the largest country by territory on the face of the earth. You still had like a lot of like Cold War shit. Like we're in a new Cold War now with both Russia and China. And yeah. So you still have these rival military blocks, military alliances that are still like that still despise each other. I mean, a lot of these generals on both sides, like they were serving during the Cold War, except the Russian generals were once Soviet generals, and the Americans and the Brits and the French and all these other people that are in NATO, like they still have that Cold War type mindset. And even though there's been like thaws, like they still see each other as being enemies. Inter-imperialist competition. That's pretty much all. That's pretty much what it comes down to. Inter-imperialist competition. When you're an imperialist power, your goal is not to cooperate unless you really have to with rival imperialist powers. Your goal is to one-up them and fix it so that their plans are thwarted. Russia tries to thwart America's plans. America tries to thwart Russia's plans. Russia and China work together to thwart America and Europe's plans. Like the world is still divided up along imperialist lines.
one day press you tomorrow? And you'll agree again.
Out of all things, I thought that would happen today. I didn't expect to end this day by listening to two anti-communist, white supremacist reactionaries talking for 2 hours straight.
Well, it's nonsensical.
By the way, BRG, did you see that Biden said the president of Egypt was the president of Mexico earlier? Yes, I'm going to watch that after this, if I'm not asleep at the end of this.
Who's there to talk to? I just don't understand. We're ready to talk. But with whom? Where are the guarantees? None. So they started to develop the
I do appreciate Putin like explaining like how fucked up the world of foreign affairs is. Like he's basically just talking about how like, okay, we promised you this, but we're not going to do that anymore. Now we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. Like it is extremely, extremely irksome from the way he makes it sound.
territory of Ukraine. Whatever is there, I have told you the background, how this territory developed, what kind of relations there were with Russia. Every second or third person there has always had some ties with Russia. And during the elections in already independent, sovereign Ukraine, which gained its independence as a result of the Declaration of Independence, and by the way, it says that Ukraine is a neutral state, and in 2008, suddenly the doors or gates to NATO were open to it. Oh, come on. This is not how we agreed. Now, all the presidents that have come to power in Ukraine, they relied on electorate with a good attitude to Russia in one way or the other. This is the southeast of Ukraine. This is a large number of people. And it was very difficult to dissuade this electorate, which had a positive attitude towards Russia. Viktor Yanukovych came to power, and how? The first time he won after President Kuchma, they organized a third round, which is not provided for in the constitution of Ukraine. This is a coup d'etat.
Yeah, this guy's a fucking Ukrainian constitutional expert now.
Just imagine, someone in the United States wouldn't like the outcome.
In 2014?
Before that. No, this was before that. After President Kuchma, Viktor Yanukovych won the elections. However, we said, no, this is not going to work.
Have you read N.B. Turner's book, Is China a Socialist Country? Yes, I have. I haven't read it in a while, but I recall it being very good.
We shall close our borders with Ukraine then. The customs borders, that is. Yanukovych started to calculate how much Ukraine was going to gain, how much to lose, and said to his European partners, I need more time to think before...
Funny, the only time Putin is honest is when describing the times Russia was genuinely fucked over. How perfectly coincidental. I mean, that's pretty much all politicians, isn't it? Does Putin even count as a politician anymore, though?
Signing. The moment he said that, the opposition began to take destructive steps which were supported by the West. It all came down to Maidan and a coup in Ukraine.
So he did more trade with Russia than with the EU. Ukraine did.
Of course. It's not even the matter of trade volume, although for the most part it is. It is the matter of cooperation ties, which the entire Ukrainian economy was based on. The cooperation ties between the enterprises were very close since the times of the Soviet Union. One enterprise there used to produce components to be assembled both in Russia and Ukraine, and vice versa. They used to be very close ties. A coup d'etat was committed, although I shall not delve into details now, as I find doing it inappropriate, the US told us.
Look at Tucker just learning shit. He looks constipated.
Calm Yanukovych down, and we will calm the opposition. Let the situation unfold in the scenario of a political settlement. We said, all right, agreed, let's do it this way. As the Americans requested, Yanukovych did use neither the armed force of this war machine.
What was but that was 8 years before the current conflict started. So what was the trigger for you? What was the moment where you decided you had to do this?
Спровоцировал конфликт изначально.
Initially, it was the coup in Ukraine that provoked the conflict. By the way, back then the representatives of 3 European countries, Germany, Poland and France, arrived. They were the guarantors of the signed agreement between the government of Yanukovych and the opposition. They signed it as guarantors. Despite that, the opposition committed a coup, and all these countries pretended that they didn't remember that they were guarantors of the peaceful settlement. They just threw it in the stove right away, and nobody recalls that. I don't know if the US know anything about the agreement between the opposition and the authorities and its three guarantors who, instead of bringing this whole situation back in the political field, supported the coup. Although it was meaningless, believe me. Because we agreed with the fact that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, our borders should be along the borders of former Union's republics. We agreed to that. But we never agreed that in the early 19th century, the Ukraine
This guy would be the worst fucking professor ever. All his students would be asleep.
himself, by the way,
about resolving the conflict in Ukraine, peace talks.
PRG, I know this is unrelated to Putin and Tucker, but what are your thoughts on the Greensboro massacre? What lessons can we learn from the massacre and from the actions of the Communist Workers' Party? I mean, honestly, from all of the accounts that I've read, it was adventurism on the part of the CWP. They thought that they had mass support that they did not have. And there's a really, really good write-up on it. I'll see if I can find it from the Amilcar Cabral Collective. It basically says that they bit off more than they could chew. And they were unprepared for the shit that they had brought down on themselves. Of course, the fault still lies with the fascists that attacked them and the cops that enabled the fascists. But if you're going to call out the reactionaries, then you sure as fuck better have the people behind you armed, and you better make sure that you yourselves know what you're doing with weapons as well. You can't just call out people who have been hunting since they were kids, people who are Vietnam War vets, to a battle, and then complain when they show up.
Они были, они дошли до очень высокой стадии согласования позиций, сложно.
They have been. They reached a very high stage of coordination of positions in a complex process, but still they were almost finalized. But after we withdrew our troops from Kiev, as I have already said, the other side threw away all these agreements and obeyed the instructions of Western countries, European countries, and the United States to fight Russia to the bitter end. Moreover, the president of Ukraine has legislated a ban on negotiating with Russia.
So, that piece that I was talking about a few seconds ago, I linked it in chat, so you can read it at your leisure.
He signed a
It's really good.
decree forbidding everyone to negotiate with Russia. But how are we going to negotiate if he forbade himself and everyone to do this? We know that he is putting forward some ideas about this settlement, but in order to agree on something, we need to have a dialogue. Is that not right?
Well, but you wouldn't be speaking to the Ukrainian president, you'd be speaking to the American president. When was the last time you spoke to Joe Biden?
I cannot remember when I talked to him.
Neither can Biden.
I do not remember. We can look it up.
You don't remember?
No. Why? Do I have to remember everything? I have my own things to do. We have domestic political affairs.
Well, he's funding the war that you're fighting, so I would think that would be memorable.
Well, yes, he funds, but I talked to him before the special military operation, of course. And I said to him,
Jesus, this guy's a master at KGB-style doublespeak. It's an invasion, not a special military operation. Special military operations don't last almost 2 fucking years, bro.
then, by the way, I will not go into details, I never do, but I said to him then, I believe that you are making a huge mistake of historic proportions by supporting
Kind of like you did when you invaded Ukraine. Like, there's people saying that Russia might balkanize over this.
everything that is happening there in Ukraine by pushing Russia away. I told him repeatedly, by the way. I think that would be correct if I stop here.
What did he say?
Ask him, please. It is easier for you. You are a citizen of the United States. Go and ask him.
I would literally kill to see Tucker talk to Biden. That would be of epic proportions. Instead of Putin trolling Tucker, it would be Tucker trolling Biden.
It is not appropriate for me to comment on our conversation.
But you haven't spoken to him since before February of 2022.
Нет, мы не разговаривали. Но у нас есть.
No, we haven't spoken.
Кстати говоря,
Certain contacts are being maintained, though. Speaking of which,
про мое
Putin is literally saying that I don't remember how my own life. It is literally gaslighting. It's illegal to call it a war invasion in Russia, I believe. That's why he's still stuck on the special military operation stuff, because if anyone referred to it as anything other than that, it's illegal. That's why I'm glad I live in the United States where we have the First Amendment. Also, look at this look on his fucking face. Looks like one of those fucking blob fish.
do you remember what I told you about my proposal to work together on a missile defense system?
Yes.
да. Вот
Yes.
можно спросить у всех. Они же
You can
все
ask all of
здоровы,
them.
здоровы.
All of them are safe and sound, thank God.
Бывший президент.
The former president, Condoleezza, is safe and sound, and I think Mr. Gates and the current director of the intelligence agency, Mr. Burns, the then ambassador to Russia, in my opinion, are very
Yes.
successful ambassador.
Они все свидетели этих разговоров.
They were all witnesses to these conversations.
То же самое,
Ask
если
them.
вам интересно, что ответил.
Same here. If you are interested in what Mr. President Biden responded to me, ask him. At any rate, I talked to him about it.
I'm definitely interested, but from the outside, it seems like this could devolve or evolve into something that brings the entire world into conflict and could initiate a nuclear launch. And so why don't you just call Biden and say, let's work this out?
Putin is such an asshole, but it is genuinely funny when he pretends Biden is just like some estranged cousin with a drinking habit.
А чего решить?
How much you want to bet that Tucker is wearing a hairpiece?
Всё очень,
Let's wait till the camera goes back on him. As a bald person, I'm pretty familiar with whether or not somebody's wearing a wig or not. No, I have never worn a wig. I am never going to wear a wig. I am never going to wear a toupee. I am never going to wear a hairpiece. I think I'm quite attractive as a bald black man.
It's there to work out. It's very simple. I repeat,
Есть контакты по линии там различных.
we have contacts through various agencies.
Я вам скажу, что мы говорим на эту тему.
I will tell you what we are saying on this matter and what we are conveying to the US leadership.
Боевые.
If you really want to stop fighting, you need to stop supplying weapons. It will be over within a few weeks. That's it.
Когда можно договориться?
And then we can agree on some terms. Before you do that,
Что проще?
stop.
Чего мне звонить?
What's easier? Why would I call him?
Или
What should I talk to him about? Or beg him for what?
And what
вы
messages do you
собираетесь
get back?
поставить такое-то
Yeah, I'm leaning towards he's definitely had some type of work done up there.
такое-то оружие на Украину? Ой,
You're going to deliver such and such weapons to Ukraine? Oh, I'm afraid, please don't. What is there to talk about?
Do you think
Yeah, he's had something. Well, see a little gray going there. Yeah, I think he's had something done. I don't know if it's transplants or what, but yeah, that's not all him.
NATO is worried about this becoming a global war or a nuclear conflict?
At least that's
Matter of fact, no, fuck that. I think that's his real hair because I see gray at the temples.
what they're talking about. And they're trying to intimidate their own population with an imaginary Russian threat. This is an obvious fact.
Joe Biden was long prophesied as the destroyer of this world, the division of man, elves, and dwarves, created by him and his dark magic. You all be coming up with some shit.
And thinking people, not Philistines, but thinking people, analysts, those who are engaged in real politics, just smart people, understand perfectly
If you want to stop the fighting, just let me win.
well.
из налогоплательщиков. Это тоже удивляет.
This also confuses me. But today's German leadership is guided by the interests of the collective West rather than its national interests. Otherwise, it is difficult to explain the logic of their action or inaction. After all, it is not only about Nord Stream 1, which was blown up, and the Nord Stream 2 was damaged. But one pipe is safe and sound, and gas can be supplied to Europe through it. But Germany does not open it. We are ready, please.
Но Германия же не открывает его.
There's another route through Poland called Yamal Europe, which also allows for large flow. Poland has closed it, but Poland packs from the German hand. It receives money from the pan-European funds, and Germany is the main donor to these pan-European funds. Germany feeds Poland to a certain extent, and they close their route to Germany. Why? I don't understand. Ukraine, to which the Germans supply weapons and give money. Germany is the second sponsor of the United States in terms of financial aid to Ukraine. There are two gas routes through Ukraine. They simply closed one route, the Ukrainians. Open the second route and please get gas from Russia. They do not open it. Why don't the Germans say, look guys, we give you money and weapons, open up the valve, please, let the gas from Russia pass through for us. We're buying liquefied gas at exorbitant prices in Europe, which brings the level of our competitiveness and economy in general down to zero. Do you want us to give you money? Let us have the decent existence. Make money for our economy, because this is where the money we give you comes from.
Hunter Biden is smoking crack with the orcs in the dark forests.
They refuse to do so. Why? Ask them. That is what is like in their heads. Those are highly incompetent people.
Well, maybe the world is breaking into two hemispheres, one with cheap energy, the other without. And I want to ask you that. If we're now a multipolar world, obviously we are, can you describe the blocks of alliances? Who is it?
I guarantee you the fucking LaRoucheite brainworms have gotten to Tucker. Like, did Haas or one of his cronies brief this guy before he went over here? Like, I would lay money on it.
In each side, do you think?
Listen, you have said that the world is breaking into two hemispheres. A human brain is divided into two hemispheres. One is responsible for one type of activities, the other one is more about creativity and so on. But it is still one and the same head. The world should be a single whole. Security should be shared rather than meant for the golden billion. That is the only scenario where the world could be stable, sustainable, and predictable. Until then,
that's not going to happen as long as capitalism and imperialism exists. You are dreaming. They didn't teach this guy Marxism, Leninism at all. I guarantee you that they stopped, like, leaning on that so hard, like, after the 60s. Like, I actually got this book from my college library once. It was called Fundamentals of Marxism, Leninism. I think it was written during the Brezhnev era, like, late 60s. And it was funny because it had, like, the fucking State Department stamp on it. But I read it. It was just the driest, most warmed over shit. Like, it reminded me of a calculus textbook. There was no life. There was no nothing in it. Yeah, Putin is an ex-KGB agent.
then, while the head is split in two parts, it is an illness, a serious adverse condition. It is a period of severe disease that the world is going through now.
Tucker is coming up with 50 IQ questions and Putin is answering with poetic metaphors.
But I think that thanks to honest journalism, this work is akin to work
Please don't tell me you think that Tucker Carlson is a fucking honest journalist.
of the doctors. This could somehow be remedied.
Well, let's just give one example, the US dollar, which has kind of united the world in a lot of ways, maybe not to your advantage, but certainly to ours. Is that going away as the...
I hate any math that involves letters. Hold on, I need to get some of my eye drops.
reserve currency, the universally accepted currency? How have sanctions, do you think, changed the dollar's place in the world?
You know, to use the dollar as a tool of foreign policy struggle is one of the biggest strategic mistakes made by the US political leadership. The dollar is the cornerstone of the United States power. I think everyone understands very well that no matter how many dollars are printed, they are quickly dispersed all over the world.
3%, примерно 3,4, что ли. Вот, приемлемо для США абсолютно.
Inflation in the United States is minimal. It's about 3 or 3.4%, which is, I think, totally acceptable for the US. But they won't stop printing. What does the debt of $33 trillion tell us about? It is about the emission.
Как только политическое руководство приняло решение использовать доллар в качестве инструмента политической борьбы,
Nevertheless, it is the main weapon used by the United States to preserve its power across the world. As soon as the political leadership decided to use the US dollar as a tool of political struggle, a blow was dealt to this
Pro tip, if you're going to be staring at a screen for 2 hours, keep eye drops handy, because it will dry your eyes the fuck out.
American power.
и огромное.
I would not like to use any strong language, but
When is the BRG differential equations are coming? Never.
it is a stupid thing to do and a grave mistake.
Сокращается запасом доллара.
Putin and Tucker out here with some George Lucas dialogue, actual real life wooden dialogue. Like, yeah, this is the most stilted, boring fucking interview I've ever sat through.
Сейчас все смотрят на то, что происходит, да, и начинают искать возможность.
Look at what is going on in the world.
Но если в отношении
Even the United States allies are now downsizing their dollar reserves. Seeing this, everyone starts looking for ways to protect
I mean, Putin isn't a fucking idiot. Like, he's not an idiot like Biden. He knows what he's talking about. But we have to keep in mind, like, this guy is naturally going to be skewed towards the interests of his own country. So just keep that in mind. It always, like, my main issue with multipolarity bros is that they fail to consider that these countries are acting in their own interests. They think that these countries are somehow working for the benefit of the third world, or that 4 or 5 different imperialist powers is better than just one. Like, that's a very fucked up anti-Marxist way to look at struggle.
themselves. But the fact that the United States applies restrictive measures to certain countries, such as placing restrictions on transactions, freezing assets, etc.,
Everything that America has done to Russia, pretty much.
causes grave concern and sends a signal to the whole world.
в России
What did we have here? Until 2022, about 80% of Russian foreign trade transactions were made in US dollars and euros.
в наших расчетах с третьими странами. Значит,
US dollars accounted for approximately 50% of our transactions with third countries, while currently it is down to 13%. It wasn't us who banned the use of the US dollar.
США приняли решение ограничить наши расчеты в долларах.
We had no such intention.
Why doesn't Putin, the larger of the debaters, simply eat Tucker Carlson? It's not a debate, it's an interview.
Yep.
Putin isn't an idiot, but this interview could be much less boring if we had a real journalist, I agree.
It was decision of the United States to restrict our transactions in US dollars.
I think that's I think that's a fair assessment. The question is what comes next, and maybe you trade one colonial power for another, much less sentimental and forgiving colonial power. I mean, is the BRICS, for example, in danger of being completely dominated by the Chinese economy in a way that's not good for their sovereignty? Do you worry about that?
Эти страшилки нам
Well, we have heard those boogeyman stories before. It is a boogeyman story. We're neighbors with China. You cannot choose neighbors just as you cannot choose close relatives. We share a border of 1,000 kilometers with them. This is number one. Second, we have a centuries-long history of coexistence. We're used to it. Third, China's foreign policy
I guess the Sino-Soviet split was just a little hiccup. Like, it wasn't just coexistence.
philosophy.
Like, the Russians literally helped carve up China. They were part of the expedition against the Righteous Fish movement, also known as the Boxers. They had a stranglehold on Manchuria. They extorted a fucking seaport. Like, yeah, the Russian Empire jumped into the imperialist slicing up of China as well. And then you had the Stalin era, where Mao correctly pointed out that like Stalin was a tiger that you had to snatch meat out of his mouth, and then you had the Sino-Soviet split where they were you had Soviet and Chinese border troops shooting it out with each other over little chunks of land and islands in the middle of the fucking river. So it wasn't necessarily just coexistence. That's just revisionist history from Putin. They have spent most of their time as rivals, or as or with China basically being an underling to various imperial powers, of which Russia was one.
Is not aggressive. Its idea is to always look for compromise, and we can see that.
Tucker Carlson is asking questions, and Putin just ignores the question and tells a story. It's so good.
The next point is as follows. We are always told the same.
Yeah, he's giving Tucker a lecture. This isn't an interview. This is a fucking lecture. It's pathetic.
Same boogeyman story, and here it goes again. Through an euphemistic form, but it is still the same boogeyman story. The cooperation with China keeps increasing. The pace at which China's cooperation with Europe is growing is higher and greater than that of the growth of Chinese-Russian cooperation. Ask Europeans, aren't they afraid? They might be, I don't know. But they are still trying to access China's market at all costs, especially now that they are facing economic problems. Chinese businesses are also exploring the European market.
Also note that there's not been a word about socialism said. It's all, like Putin said, we're bourgeois. We're as bourgeois as you are. We are a market economy. So is China. It's all talk about markets, economies. Nothing about socialism or any of that. That's why, I find it hilarious. Like, these multipolarity bros are willfully deluding themselves about this whole issue. Like Nate says, these are well-curated questions that don't challenge Putin.
Do Chinese businesses have small presence in the United States? Yes, the political decisions are such that they are trying to limit their cooperation with China. It is to your own detriment, Mr.
Watch Tucker Carlson become a MAGA communist after this. Yeah, he's already halfway there.
Tucker, that you are limiting cooperation with China. You are hurting yourself. It is a delicate matter, and there are no silver bullet solutions, just as it is with the dollar. Counterproductive. Yes, we understand and are aware that in the United States, despite all the economic problems, the situation is still normal, with the economy growing decently. The GDP is growing by 2.5%, if I'm not mistaken. But if we want to ensure the future, then we need to change our approach to what is changing. As I already said, the world would nevertheless change, regardless of how the developments in Ukraine end. The world is changing. In the United States themselves, experts are writing that the United States are nonetheless gradually changing their position in the world. It is your experts who write that. I just read them. The only question is how this would happen, painfully and quickly, or gently and gradually. And this is written by people who are not anti-American. They simply follow global development trends. That's it. And in order to assess them and change policies, we need people who think, look forward, can analyze and recommend certain decisions at the level of political leaders.
And that is not Tucker Carlson.
I just have to ask, you've said clearly that NATO expansion.
I mean, he is a Russian in Russia. He's more comfortable in his native language.
Expansion eastward is a violation of the promise you all were made in 1990. It's a threat to your country. Right before you sent troops into Ukraine, the Vice President of the United States went to the Munich Security Conference and encouraged the President of Ukraine to join NATO. Do you think that was an effort to provoke you into military action?
I repeat once again, we have repeatedly proposed to seek a solution to the problems that arose in Ukraine after 2014 coup d'etat through peaceful means. But no one listened to us. And
I know, it's everybody else's fault. Russia did nothing wrong.
moreover, the Ukrainian leaders who were under the complete US control suddenly declared that they would not comply with the Minsk agreements. They disliked everything there and continued military activity in that territory.
Шло освоение этой территории натовскими военными структурами. Под видом различных центров.
And in parallel, that territory was being exploited by NATO military structures under the guise of various personnel
I'm pretty sure he speaks German. I think he was stationed in East Germany, so I'm pretty sure he's conversant, if not fluent, in German.
training and retraining centers. Arakamiya put it, we could have stopped those hostilities with war a year and a half ago already. But Western culture is more pragmatic after all.
Не во внешних проявлениях, и в том, чтобы
I'm skipping through this shit. I'm sorry. If I watched this whole fucking thing, I would be asleep.
As for religion in general,
This is an excruciatingly, indescribably boring man.
или бить головой в пол.
you know, it's not about external manifestations. It's not about going to church every day or banging your head on the floor.
Человекоориентированная.
It is in the heart. And our culture is so human-oriented.
Russian culture is human-oriented?
Dostoevsky, who was very well known in the West and the genius of Russian culture, Russian literature, spoke a lot about this, about the Russian soul.
Русский человек, российский человек, он думает больше о вечном, он думает больше о ценностях.
After all, Western society is more pragmatic. Russian people think more about the eternal, about moral values. I don't know, maybe you won't agree with me, but Western culture
In Eastern Bloc countries, they made you learn Russian in the military. Wow, that's not cultural imperialism at all.
is more pragmatic after
Дает
all.
возможность вот сегодняшнему этому золотому миллиарду.
I'm not saying this is bad. It makes it possible for today's golden billion to achieve good success in production, even in science and so on.
Что мы вроде как выглядим одинаково, но сознание.
There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that we kind of look the same, but our
Well,
minds
so
are
do you
built a
see
little
the
different.
supernatural at
The only culture that is human-oriented is socialist culture, correct?
work as you look out across what's happening in the world now? Do you see God at work? Do you ever think to yourself, these are forces that are not human?
Да нет, я, честно говоря, так не думаю. Я думаю о том, что
No, to be honest, I don't
мировое
think
сообщество
so.
развивается вот по своим внутренним
My opinion is that the development of the world community is in accordance with the inherent laws, and those laws are what they are.
Так было всегда в истории человечества.
It's always been this way in the history of mankind. Some nations and countries rose, became stronger and more numerous, and then left the international stage, losing the status they had accustomed to.
Наверное, не нужно приводить эти примеры, но начиная
There's probably no need for me to give examples, but we could start with the Genghis Khan and horde conquerors, the Golden Horde, and then end with the Roman Empire.
человечество каждый
It seems that there has never been anything like the Roman Empire in the history of mankind.
потенциал варваров постепенно накапливался.
Nevertheless, the
Oh my God, is Putin a Roma-boo?
potential of the barbarians gradually grew, as did their population. In general, the barbarians were getting stronger and begun to develop economically, as we would say today.
Экономически они стали укрепляться.
This eventually led to the collapse of the Roman Empire and the regime imposed by the Romans.
500 лет. Этот процесс.
However, it took 5 centuries for the Roman Empire to fall apart.
В сегодняшней ситуации
The difference with what is happening now
процессы изменений
is that all the processes of change are happening at a much faster pace than in Roman times.
So when does the AI empire start, do you think?
меня
This dude is dumb as a sack of shit.
всё
You've got the president of one of the most powerful countries in the world He's just finished giving you an almost 2 hour long lecture. And, oh, so when does the AI empire start?
You're asking increasingly more complicated questions. To answer them, you need to be an expert in big numbers, big data, and AI. Mankind is currently facing many threats. Due to the genetic researches, it is now possible to create a superhuman, a specialized human being, a genetically engineered athlete, scientist, military man. There are reports that Elon Musk had already had a chip implanted in the human brain in the USA.
What do you think of that?
Oh my God, Tucker is just soying out. So, what do you think of that? And Putin knows this guy's an idiot. He's toying with him and toying with his audience.
Well, I think there's no stopping Elon Musk. He will do as he sees fit. Nevertheless, you need to find some common ground with him, search for ways to persuade him. I think he's a smart person, I truly believe he is. So you need to reach an agreement with him because this process needs to be formalized and subjected to certain rules. Humanity has to consider what is going to happen due to the newest development in genetics or in AI. One can make an approximate prediction of what will happen. Once mankind felt an existential threat coming from nuclear weapons, all nuclear nations began to come to terms with one another since they realized the negligent use of nuclear weaponry could drive humanity to extinction. It is impossible to stop research.
Yeah. Putin is toying with this dude. He knows how to read people. He's former KGB. He knows how to read people like at a glance, and he read Tucker correctly as a drooling idiot. So he basically spent 2 hours fucking with this dude.
What is happening is, to a certain extent, an element of a civil war. Everyone in the West thinks that the Russian people have been split by hostilities forever. No, they will be reunited. The unity is still there. Why are the Ukrainian authorities dismantling the Ukrainian Orthodox Church? Because it brings together not only the territory, it brings together our souls. No one will be able to separate the soul.
That was simultaneously the most boring and the most hilarious shit I have ever watched. Here's some more hilarious shit. So there was a report that came out today, basically portraying Biden as like a senile goon that doesn't even know what the fuck is going on in his own house. Hold on, let me pull it up. The Her report. In his interview with our office, Mr. Biden's memory was worse. Mr. Biden's recorded conversations with Zwonitzer from 2017 are often painfully slow, with Mr. Biden struggling to remember events and straining at times to read and relay his own notebook entries. In his interview with our office, his memory was worse. He did not remember when he was vice president, forgetting on the first day of the interview when his term ended, if it was 2013, when did I stop being vice president? And forgetting on the second day of the interview when his term began. In 2009, am I still vice president? He did not remember, even within several years, when his son Beau died. And his memory appeared hazy when describing the Afghanistan debate that was so important to him once. Among other things, he mistakenly said he had a real difference of opinion with General Carl Eikenberry, when in fact Eikenberry was an ally whom Mr. Biden cited approvingly in his Thanksgiving memo to President Obama. In a case where the government must prove that Mr. Biden knew he had possession of the classified Afghanistan documents after the vice presidency and chose to keep those documents, Knowing he was violating the law, we expect that at trial his attorneys would emphasize those limitations in his recall. He reminds me of Junior Soprano, and it says, yeah, except he has a shiny body to our knowledge. So that's like the crux of what he's going to try to respond to.
Let me say a few things before I take your questions. As you know, the special counsel released his findings today about
He sounds drunk.
their look into my handling of classified documents. I was pleased to see he reached a firm conclusion that no charges should be brought against me in this case. This was an exhaustive investigation going back more than 40 years, even into the 1970s when I was still a new United States Senator. The special counsel acknowledged I cooperated completely. I did not throw up any roadblocks. I sought no delays. In fact, I was so determined to give the special counsel what he needed, I went forward with a 5-hour in-person interview over 2 days on October the 8th and 9th of last year, even though Israel had just been attacked by Hamas on the 7th, and I was it was in the middle of handling an international crisis. I was especially pleased to see special counsel make clear the stark distinction and difference between this case and Mr. Trump's case. The special counsel wrote, and I quote, "Several material distinctions between Mr. Trump's case and Mr. Biden's are clear," continuing to quote, "Most notably, after given multiple chances to return classified documents to avoid prosecution, Mr. Trump allegedly did the opposite. According to the indictment, he not only refused to return the documents for many months, he also
I refuse to believe Biden actually has opinions about things. I think his memory sucks because he has to come up with a moral argument on the spot.
obstructed justice.
No, honestly, from that little excerpt of the report, I haven't read the whole thing. Probably read it at work tomorrow in my downtime. And like his behavior in his past few speeches, like this guy has like mid-level dementia. Like that's not a question.
By enlisting others to destroy evidence and then to lie about it. In contrast, we went on to say Mr. Biden turned in classified documents to the National Archives and the Department of Justice, consented to the search of multiple locations, including his home, sat for a voluntary interview, and in other ways cooperated with the investigation, end of quote. I've seen the headlines since the report was released about my willful retention of documents. These assertions are not only misleading, they're just plain wrong. On page 215, if you had a chance, I know it's a thick document. On page 215, the report of the special counsel found the exact opposite. Here's what he wrote. There is in fact a shortage of evidence that I willfully retained classified materials related to Afghanistan. On page 12, the special counsel also wrote, for in other documents, the decision to decline criminal charges was straightforward. The evidence suggests that Mr. Biden did not willfully retain these documents. The evidence said I did not willfully retain these documents. In addition, I know there's some attention paid to some language in the report about my recollection of events. There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business.
Oh, he's pulling out the tough guy from Scranton act.
Let me tell you something.
Mitch.
Some of you have commented, I wear since the day he died, every single day, the rosary he got from Our Lady of...
Our Lady of what, Joe? Our Lady of what?
Every Memorial Day we hold a service remembering him.
Look, he just stopped mid-sentence. Bro.
Single day.
He just stopped mid-sentence, Our Lady of, and then went on to talk about something else.
Rosary he got from Our Lady of...
Our Lady of...
Every Memorial Day we hold a service remembering him, attended by friends and family and the people who loved him. I don't need anyone to remind me when he passed away or passed away. Simple truth is I sat for a 5-hour interview over 2 days of events going back 40 years. At the same time I was managing an international crisis, their task was to make a decision about whether to move forward with charges in this case. That was their decision to make. That's the council's decision to make. That's his job.
We're supposed to vote for him to stop fascism in November. He'd probably authorize Project 2025 thinking that it's one of his agenda plans by accident.
And they decided not to move forward. For any extraneous commentary, they don't know what they're talking about.
This is wrong. Biden should be in a retirement home being looked after, not paraded like this. No, he should be in The Hague facing trial for his enabling of war crimes being committed by Israel.
It has no place in this report. The bottom line is the matter is now closed. I'm going to continue what I've always focused on, my job of being President of the United States of America. Now, thank you, and I'll take some questions.
President Biden, something the special counsel said in
Look at him, he's like surprised. Who called my name like that? Who are you? Get out of my house, you little fucker.
report is that one of the reasons you were not charged is because, in his description, you are a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. It's
How
totally
bad
out.
is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad, I let you speak.
What? What did he?
That's
Your
my.
memory has gotten worse, Mr.
No, look,
President.
my memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? You know, I guess I just forgot what was going on.
Mr. President,
Voters have concerns about your age. How are you going to assuage them? And do you fear that this report is only going to fuel further concerns about your age?
Only by some of you.
Mr.
You
President,
were cleared of criminal
Mr.
liability
President,
today.
Mr. President.
Do you take responsibility for at least being careless with classified material?
I take responsibility for not having seen exactly what my staff was doing. It goes in and points out.
Oh, now he's gonna blame it on his fucking staff. Of course, the little guy always gets punished. The big boss always gets off scot-free, so he can bring his demented ass up here and rant and rave and ramble and act tough and how fucking dare they? I know when my son died, we hold an event at some.
Things that appeared in my garage, things that came out of my home, things that were moved not by me, but my staff.
Well, why do you allow your staff to go through your fucking papers, though?
Mr. President, for months when you were asked about your age, you would respond with the words, "Watch me."
Watch
Many
me.
American people have been watching, and they have expressed concerns about your age.
That is your judgment. That is
this
your
according to
judgment.
public
That is
polling.
not
They
the
expressed
judgment of the
concerns-
press.
They express concerns about your mental acuity. They say that you
That is your judgment. That is your judgment. That is not the judgment of the press. This is word salad. None of the shit he's saying makes sense. If he's not consulting a paper or a teleprompter and he has to give a totally off-the-cuff response, he can't do it. It always ends up like mushy shit.
are too old.
This guy is not qualified to be president of the United States. I know 81, 82-year-old people who are sharp as fuck, like who have all of the mental clarity and coherence that they had when they were like 35. This guy ain't it.
Mr. President, in December,
Like the DNC needs to be held accountable for this elder abuse. I'm sorry. Like, why are you still running this guy? He's 81 years old. So if he's reelected, he'll be 85, 86 when his second term is up. He's going to be almost 90 years old.
you told me that you believe there are many other Democrats who could defeat Donald Trump. So why does it have to be you now? What is your answer
I'm
to
the
that
most-
question?
Like, this guy's older than fucking Reagan was.
Qualified person in this country to be president of the United States and finish the job I started.
Do you believe that, guys? Why are you confused?
Oh, y'all need to stop. Y'all are confusing the poor old man. Y'all are going to cross the wires in his brain and he's going to have a stroke.
The names of world leaders.
I did not share classified information. I did not share it.
With your ghostwriter.
With my ghostwriter, I did not. Guarantee you did not. What the well, no, he did not say that. He did not say that. Well, let me answer your question. The fact of the matter is, what I didn't want.
This is fucking Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino. That's who he reminds me of.
repeated, I didn't want him to know, and I didn't read it to him, was I had written a long memorandum to President Obama.
Michael Parenti is borderline vegetable, and he still has more mental capacity than Biden.
Why we should not be in Afghanistan, and I was multiple pages. And so what I was referring to, I said classified. I should have said should be private, because it was a contact between the president and the vice president as to what was going on. That's what he was referring to. It was not classified information in that document. That was not classified.
Get out of my house, you little fuckers! Stop fucking yelling. Get out of our house.
When you look back at this incident, is there anything you would do differently now? And do you think that a special prosecutor should have been appointed in the first place in both of these cases?
First of all, what I would have done is overseen the transfer of the material that was in my office, in my offices. I should have done that. If I go back, I didn't have the responsibility to that. That was my staff was supposed to do that, and they referenced that in the report. And my staff did not do it in the way that, for example, I didn't know how half the boxes got in my garage until I found out staff gathered them up, put them together, and took them to the garage in my home. And all the stuff that was in my home was in filing cabinets that were either locked or able to be locked. It was in my house. It wasn't out in, like in Mar-a-Lago, in a public place where, and none of it was high classified. Didn't have any of that red stuff on it. You know what I mean, around the corners? None of that. And so I wish I had paid more attention to how the documents were being moved and where. I thought they were being moved to the archives. I thought all of it was being moved. That's what I thought.
You are the president of the United States. Your job is to do your due diligence. Like, you either have memory issues or you don't have memory issues. Your job's to do your due diligence. Like, how the fuck are you going to come after Trump for something that you were doing it? Bruh. You're not, bruh. Just retire. Just retire. Presidents have literally said, you know what, I can't do it anymore. I won't do it anymore. You're so stubborn and you're so arrogant that you don't realize when it's time to throw in the towel.
Now, what was the last part of your question?
Whether a special counsel should have been appointed in this case and in the case of your rival former president.
I think a special counsel should have been appointed. And the reason I think a special counsel should have been appointed is because I did not want to be in a position that they looked at Trump and weren't going to look at me, just like they looked at the vice president. And the fact is, they made a firm conclusion. I did not break the law, period. Thank you all very, very much.
Netanyahu says that he has ordered the IDF.
Hostage negotiation.
Oh my God. Why don't you just go let that man put his fucking socks up and go watch fucking, go watch All in the Family? Why are you dragging this man back up here for this? I think these reporters get a kick out of this shit. They get a kick out of torturing this guy.
I'm of the view, as you know, that the conduct of the response in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top. I think that
that's how you can say, why are none of these people uttering the word genocide? It's over the top. Over the top is when your fucking pot of rice boils over. That's, oh my God. We are so cooked. We are so cooked as a country. Why don't y'all just make me military dictator? Like, make me military dictator until we find out what's going on. And I get this country together, because we're fucking cooked. If people like this, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, all these old motherfuckers, man, just make me military dictator. I won't fuck the country up. I won't deport all the white people. I promise. Pinky swear. Cross my fingers.
as you know,
Well, actually, I won't be a military dictator because I'm not in the military, nor have I ever been.
initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open.
We're so fucking cooked. But you know what? I've never been to Nigeria. I've never been to Nigeria. But I'm about to get on fucking Travelocity and buy a fucking ticket to Lagos. I am. I can't. This dude is not qualified to rule me. He's not.
Up the gate to
I'm governed by my inferiors.
allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. I talked to Bibi to open the gate on the Israeli side. I've been pushing really hard to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza.
Deport me to La Paz. ¿Eres boliviano? Está bien. Vive Evo Morales.
There are a lot of innocent people who are starving, a lot of innocent people who are in trouble and dying, and it's got to stop, number one. Number two, I was also in a position that I'm the guy that made the case that we have to do much more to increase the amount of material going in, including fuel, including other items. I've been on the phone with the Qataris, I've been on the phone with the Egyptians, I've been on the phone with the Saudis to get as much aid as we possibly can into
Vive Presidente Black
Gaza. There are innocent people, innocent women and children who are also in bad.
Then stop sending weapons to them, you fucking idiot. I was about to say the other word. I'm not trying to get canceled.
Badly in need of help. And so that's what we're pushing. And I'm pushing very hard now to deal with this hostage ceasefire because, I've been working tirelessly in this deal.
Javier Milei went to Israel to go to the wall. Yeah, I know. And the Lions Den or Hamas isn't in Jerusalem, but they had the opportunity to do the funniest thing ever. They could have infiltrated the fucking Suicide Squad.
How can I say this without revealing? To lead to a sustained pause in the fighting, in the actions taking place in the Gaza Strip. And because I think if we can get the delay for that, the initial...
Honestly, I'm convinced Biden is a social experiment by the DNC to see how much this man can fuck up the country in one term. I don't think he'll get canceled for being ableist to a war criminal. How long have you been on the internet, Nate?
delay. I think that we would be able to extend that so that...
I can get fucking canceled for wearing a flat cap. You're engaging in cultural expropriation of the Irish people.
That we could increase the prospect that this fighting in Gaza changes. There's also negotiations, you may recall, in the very beginning, right after, make them part of the Middle East, recognize them related to
Yeah, fuck this. I can only tolerate so much incompetence in a night. Fuck Tucker Carlson, fuck Vladimir Putin, and fuck Joe Biden. I'm going to get my hamburgers. Y'all go to bed. Try not to be like Tucker Carlson. Try not to be like our imbecile of a president. Try to be a good person. Mao said that it only takes a bit to do good in the world. Or something. Oh, Christ. Now I sound like fucking Biden. It's contagious. The hardest thing is to do a bit of good in the world or some shit like that. I don't fucking know. It's almost 2 o'clock in the morning.